The blood seeping through Morning Rain's deerskin dress had turned from bright red to a dark crimson by the time she stumbled into the dusty main street of Redemption Springs, Arizona Territory, in the summer of 1878, and the town doctor took one long look at her bronze skin before turning his back and walking into his office without a single word. She collapsed against the hitching post outside the mercantile, her hand pressed against the gash in her side where a wild boar had gored her during her morning hunt in the mountains. The pain was unlike anything she had experienced in her 20 years of life, sharp and burning as if someone had pressed a hot brand against her ribs. Around her, townspeople gathered at a distance, whispering behind their hands, their eyes filled with suspicion and something darker. A woman in a blue calico dress pulled her child closer and hurried across the street. A man in a black suit spit tobacco juice on the ground and shook his head. Nobody moved to help. Morning Rain tried to stand, but her legs refused to cooperate. The world tilted sideways, and she tasted copper on her tongue. She had walked 3 miles from the foothills where her small camp stood hidden among the pines, 3 miles with her blood leaving a trail behind her, because she knew there was a doctor in this town. She had not expected kindness, but she had hoped for basic human decency. That hope now seemed foolish. "Get away from there, you." The sheriff's voice cut through the murmur of the crowd. "We do not want your kind bleeding all over our street." She looked up at him through blurred vision, seeing his handlebar mustache and the star pinned to his vest. She wanted to tell him she had not chosen to be injured, had not chosen to need help from people who hated her simply for existing, but the words would not come. Instead, she slumped lower against the post, feeling consciousness slip away like water through her fingers. "Sheriff, that woman is dying." Another voice, younger and deeper, rang out clear across the street. "You gonna let her bleed out right here in front of the church?" Morning Rain forced her eyes open enough to see a tall figure pushing through the crowd. He was a cowboy. That much was clear from his dusty chaps and worn boots, his hat pushed back to reveal sandy brown hair and a face tanned from long days under the desert sun. He could not have been much older than she was, perhaps 23 or 24, with broad shoulders and hands that looked like they knew hard work. "That is not our concern, Dalton." The sheriff crossed his arms. "Doc Bailey made his position clear. He does not treat Indians. You know that as well as anyone. Doc Bailey is a coward and a disgrace to his profession." The cowboy named Dalton stopped directly in front of Morning Rain, kneeling down so his green eyes were level with hers. "Miss, can you hear me? Can you tell me what happened?" She managed a nod, focusing on his face. There was no disgust there, no hatred, just concern and something that might have been anger though not directed at her. "Bore," she whispered. "Gored." He gently moved her hand away from the wound and she saw his jaw tighten as he examined it. "This needs to be cleaned and stitched, or she will die of infection even if she does not bleed out first." He looked up at the sheriff. "If Bailey will not help, I will take her to my ranch. I have veterinary supplies." "You cannot be serious, Dalton." A merchant in a striped vest stepped forward. "Your father would turn over in his grave if he knew you were helping a savage." Dalton stood slowly, and despite his youth, there was something in his posture that made the merchant take a step back. "My father taught me to help those in need regardless of who they are." He treated his horses and cattle with more compassion than you people are showing this woman. Now, unless one of you wants to explain to God why you let someone die on your doorstep, I suggest you get out of my way. Without waiting for a response, he bent down and carefully lifted Morning Rain into his arms. The movement sent fresh pain lancing through her side and she bit back a cry. "I am sorry," he said quietly, his voice meant only for her. "I will try to be gentle, but we need to move fast. My ranch is about 2 miles outside town. Can you hold on that long?" She nodded again, not trusting her voice. His arms were strong and steady, and she could feel the steady beat of his heart through his shirt. The crowd parted reluctantly as he carried her toward a bay horse tied outside the saloon. Getting her into the saddle while keeping pressure on her wound was awkward, but he managed it with surprising care, climbing up behind her and positioning her so she was leaning back against his chest. "What is your name?" he asked as he urged the horse into a careful walk, Morning Rain. The words came out barely louder than a breath. "I am Jackson Dalton. Most folks call me Jack. You are going to be all right, Morning Rain, I promise you that." She wanted to ask him why he was helping her, why he was different from the others, but the darkness was closing in again. She felt his arm tighten around her waist, heard him urge the horse into a faster gait, and then there was nothing but the rhythm of hoofbeats and the fade into unconsciousness. When awareness returned, she was lying on something soft. A bed, she realized, opening her eyes to see rough wooden beams above her and sunlight streaming through a window. The pain in her side had diminished to a dull throb, and she could smell something clean and medicinal. Carefully, she turned her head to survey her surroundings. She was in a small bedroom with simple furnishings, a dresser, a chair, and the narrow bed she occupied. Her dress had been removed and she wore what appeared to be a man's shirt, too large for her frame. Through the open doorway she could hear movement, the sound of water being poured, boots on wooden floors. "You are awake." Jack appeared in the doorway carrying a basin and clean cloths. "That is good. You have been unconscious for about 4 hours. I was starting to worry." Morning Rain tried to sit up, but he quickly set down the basin and moved to her side. "Easy now. You have lost a lot of blood and I had to stitch that wound. The boar did some serious damage." "You stitched it?" She looked at him with new surprise. He pulled the chair closer to the bed and sat down, his expression serious. "I have been working with horses and cattle since I was 12 years old. I have stitched up more gashes, treated more injuries, delivered more difficult births than I can count. Animals, not people, but the principles are the same. I cleaned the wound with carbolic acid, same as I would for one of my horses. Put in 23 stitches with catgut suture. It should heal clean if we keep it from getting infected." She reached down carefully and felt the bandage wrapped around her ribs. His work felt professional, the binding neither too tight nor too loose. "Why?" The question came out before she could stop it. "Why would you do this for me?" Jack leaned back in the chair, his green eyes studying her face. "Because it was the right thing to do, because every life has value, because I could not stand there and watch you die when I had the skills to help." He paused, then added more quietly, "And because I have seen too much hatred in this territory already. It sickens me." Morning Rain felt something unfamiliar stir in her chest, something warm despite the pain. "The doctor truly would not help me." Doc Bailey is an old bigot who thinks anyone without white skin is less than human. He has refused to treat Chinese railroad workers, Mexican farmers, and yes, native people. Last year, a Navajo boy broke his leg and Bailey turned him away. The boy's father had to set it himself. It healed crooked and now the kid walks with a limp. Jack's hands clenched into fists on his knees. "I have argued with Bailey about it more times than I can count. So have a few others in town, but he is the only doctor within 50 miles and he knows it. You could have been hurt helping me. Your reputation," he laughed, though there was no humor in it. "My reputation has been questionable since I refused to participate in a raid on a Pima village last year. The men who run this town think I am too soft, too sympathetic to Indians. They are probably right by their standards." He met her eyes. "But I sleep well at night." She studied him, this cowboy who had risked social standing to save her life. His face was honest, open in a way that seemed rare among white men she had encountered. Most looked through her or at her with contempt. Jack looked at her like she was simply another person worth the same basic dignity as anyone else. "Where is your family?" she asked. "Your wife?" "No wife. My mother died when I was 16, my father 3 years ago. It is just me now, running the ranch he built. We have about 200 head of cattle, some horses. It is not much, but it is mine." He gestured around the room. "This was my parents' room. I have been sleeping in the smaller room since Pa died. Felt wrong somehow, taking over their space. I should not be in their bed." They would not have minded, Ma especially. She used to say that a home is meant to shelter those who need shelter. He stood and picked up the basin again. "I need to clean your wound and change the dressing. It might hurt some." Morning Rain nodded, bracing herself. She had endured pain before during her coming-of-age ceremonies, during the long winter when food was scarce, and her belly cramped with hunger. This would be no different, but Jack's hands were gentler than she expected as he carefully unwrapped the bandage and examined his stitching. She could feel the warmth of his fingers against her skin, see the concentration in his face as he cleaned around the wound with gentle dabs of a cloth soaked in something that smelled sharp and medicinal. "It looks good," he said after a moment. "No signs of infection yet. We will need to keep a close watch on it for the next few days, but I think you will recover fully." As he began wrapping a fresh bandage around her ribs, he added, "You are going to need to stay here for at least a week, maybe longer. That wound needs time to heal and you need rest and food to rebuild your strength. I cannot impose on you like that. It is not an imposition. Besides, where else would you go? Back to your camp? Could you even make it up into those mountains right now?" He secured the bandage and helped her ease back down onto the pillow. "You are staying here until you are well enough to travel safely. That is final." There was no arguing with the determination in his voice. Morning Rain found she did not particularly want to argue anyway. The bed was comfortable, the room was cool despite the summer heat outside, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt safe. "Thank you," she said softly. Jack smiled, and the expression transformed his entire face, making him look younger and somehow more genuine. "You are welcome. Now, are you hungry? I'm not much of a cook, but I can manage beans and bacon and cornbread." Her stomach answered for her with a loud growl, and they both laughed. The sound felt good, natural, as if they had known each other longer than a few hours. Over the next few days, Morning Rain learned more about Jackson Dalton. He rose before dawn to tend his cattle and horses, returning to the house around mid-morning to check on her and bring her breakfast. His cooking was indeed basic but hearty, and she found herself eating more than she had in weeks. In the afternoons, he would sit with her, sometimes reading aloud from books his mother had loved, sometimes just talking about the ranch and his plans for it. She learned that he had taught himself to read using his mother's Bible and a few dime novels, that he loved horses more than almost anything and had a particular talent for breaking and training them, that he played harmonica poorly but enthusiastically, that he had traveled as far east as Texas and as far west as California, working various ranches before returning home when his father fell ill. In turn, she told him about her own life. How she was Kairikahua Apache, though she no longer lived with her tribe. How her parents had died during the long conflicts with the army, leaving her orphaned at 15. How she had survived alone in the mountains, hunting and gathering, occasionally trading furs and herbs at the Mexican settlements to the south where people were less hostile. "Do you ever get lonely?" Jack asked one evening as he changed her dressing. The wound was healing well, the stitches holding firm, and she had regained enough strength to sit up without dizziness. "Yes," she admitted. "Sometimes the solitude feels like freedom, other times it feels like exile. I understand that." He carefully applied a salve he had made from herbs and animal fat to the healing gash. "This ranch, it is everything to me, but some nights the silence gets so heavy I feel like I am drowning in it." Their eyes met, and Morning Rain felt that warmth in her chest again, stronger this time. It would be so easy, she thought, to care for this man. This cowboy with gentle hands and a good heart, but what future could there be in such feelings? When she healed, she would return to her mountains and he would continue working his ranch, and the world would go on dividing them by the color of their skin. By the end of the first week, Morning Rain was able to walk around the small ranch house, though Jack insisted she not overdo it. She found herself drawn to the kitchen, and despite his protests that she was still recovering, she began helping with meals. Her knowledge of herbs and roots expanded his limited cooking repertoire, and she showed him how to make a stew with wild onions and sage that made the tough beef tender and flavorful. "This is delicious," he said, eating his second bowl. "Where did you learn to cook like this?" "My mother." And her mother before her. We did not have much, but we knew how to make the most of what the land provided. She stirred her own bowl, memories washing over her. My grandmother could make a meal from things others would walk right past. She knew every plant, every root, which ones healed and which ones killed. "Could you teach me?" Jack leaned forward, his eyes bright with interest. "About the healing plants, I mean. I have my veterinary knowledge, but it is all from books and trial and error. If I knew more about natural medicines, I could help more animals, maybe even people if they would let me." Morning Rain considered this. Teaching him would mean spending more time together, would mean forging a deeper connection. It would make leaving harder when the time came. But the eagerness in his face, the genuine desire to learn and help, touched something deep inside her. "Yes," she said finally, "I will teach you what I know." The lessons began the next day. They started in the small garden behind the house, where a few herbs grew wild among the vegetables Jack's mother had once planted. Morning Rain showed him how to identify yarrow for stopping bleeding, how to prepare willow bark for pain and fever, how to make a poultice from comfrey leaves for bruises and sprains. Jack proved to be an attentive student, asking questions and taking notes in a small leather journal. His hands, so capable with horses and cattle, were equally careful with the delicate plants. She found herself watching those hands more than she should, noticing the way his fingers gently examined each leaf, the way he rolled stems between his palms to release their scent. "This is incredible," he said one afternoon as they sat in the shade of the house, sorting through dried herbs she had brought from her camp. He had ridden up to retrieve some of her belongings, returning with her gathering baskets and the small store of medicines she had accumulated. "You could heal so many people with this knowledge. It is criminal that Doc Bailey refuses to let you practice in town. They would not accept healing from me even if he allowed it. You know that." Jack was quiet for a moment, then said, "Some would. There are good people in Redemption Springs, even if they are outnumbered by the bigots. Mrs. Chen at the laundry, she would not care what color your skin is if you could help her daughter's cough. Samuel the blacksmith, his wife is pregnant with their 4th child and she always has difficult deliveries. He would welcome anyone who could ease her suffering. And the others, the sheriff, the merchant who called me a savage, the doctor himself, they would run me out of town or worse. Then we do not advertise. We help people quietly, one at a time, and eventually even the bigots cannot deny the good being done." He reached out and took her hand, the gesture seeming to surprise him as much as it did her. "You have a gift, Morning Rain, knowledge that could save lives. It seems wrong to hide it away in the mountains." His hand was warm around hers, calloused from work but gentle. She looked down at their joined hands, her bronze skin against his sun-darkened tan, and felt her heart beat faster. When had this happened? When had the grateful patient begun to care for her rescuer as more than just a kind stranger? "You are an unusual man, Jackson Dalton," she said softly. "I will take that as a compliment." He smiled but did not let go of her hand. "You are a remarkable woman, Morning Rain. Brave and strong and intelligent. I have known that since the moment you looked up at me on that street, bleeding and in pain, but still fighting to stay conscious." The air between them felt charged, heavy with unspoken words. Morning Rain knew she should pull her hand away, should rebuild the walls that kept her heart safe. But she did not want to. For the first time in 5 years, she did not want to be alone. "Jack," she began, but he gently squeezed her hand. "You do not have to say anything. I know this is complicated. I know there are 100 reasons why this, whatever this is, cannot work. But I also know that I look forward to seeing you every morning, that I find excuses to come back to the house during the day just to hear your voice. That I lie awake at night thinking about you just a few rooms away." He paused, then added with raw honesty, "I am falling for you, Morning Rain. Maybe I have been since the moment I picked you up in that street. And I needed you to know that, even if nothing can come of it." Her breath caught in her throat. She had suspected, had seen the way he looked at her when he thought she was not paying attention, but hearing him say it out loud made it real, made it impossible to ignore. "I feel it too," she whispered. "This pull between us. I have tried to tell myself it is just gratitude, that I am confusing appreciation for something deeper. But I know I am lying to myself." Jack's face lit up with hope and something that might have been joy. Slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, he reached up and cupped her cheek with his free hand. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone and she felt herself lean into the touch. "May I kiss you?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. Instead of answering, she closed the distance between them, pressing her lips to his in a kiss that was gentle and hesitant and perfect. His lips were warm and soft, tasting of coffee and cornbread. The kiss lasted only a moment before they pulled back, looking at each other with wonder. "That was my first kiss," Morning Rain admitted, feeling heat rise to her cheeks. "Mine too." Jack laughed, the sound bright and incredulous. "I think we did all right for beginners." She laughed with him, feeling lighter than she had in years. Then he was kissing her again, deeper this time, his hand sliding into her hair while her fingers clutched at his shirt. The world narrowed to just the two of them, two people from different worlds finding something precious and unexpected in each other. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Jack rested his forehead against hers. "Stay," he said simply. "Do not go back to the mountains. Stay here with me, we will figure out the rest." "Jack, it is not that simple." "Why not? I have a house, land, enough income to support two people. You have knowledge and skills that could help this whole community if they would let you. Together we could build something good. Together we would be targets. You know how people see relationships between whites and natives. They would call you a traitor, call me worse. They could burn down your ranch, run you out of town, or kill us both." His jaw set in that stubborn way she was beginning to recognize. "Then we will be careful, we will be smart about it, but I am not letting fear dictate my life, and I hope you will not either." He took both her hands in his. "I care about you, Morning Rain, more than I have ever cared about anyone. I want to explore this, whatever it is between us. Please give us a chance." She looked into his green eyes, saw the sincerity there, the hope and determination. Part of her wanted to protect him by walking away, by removing herself as a source of danger in his life. But a larger part, the part that had been lonely and isolated for so long, wanted desperately to say yes. "All right," she said finally. "I will stay, at least for a while. We will see how it goes." The smile that broke across his face was like sunrise, brilliant and warming. He pulled her into his arms, careful of her healing wound, and held her close. She rested her head against his chest and listened to his heartbeat, steady and strong, and let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, they could make this work. The next few weeks settled into a comfortable rhythm. Morning Rain's wound healed completely, leaving only a pale scar across her ribs. She grew stronger, able to help more around the ranch. She learned to milk the cow, feed the chickens, mend fences. Jack taught her to ride one of his gentler horses, a mare named Blossom, and they would ride out together in the early mornings to check on the cattle. In turn, she continued teaching him about medicinal plants and healing techniques. They took long walks into the foothills, and she showed him where to find the best herbs, how to harvest them at the right time, how to dry and store them for maximum potency. His journal filled with notes and sketches, becoming a comprehensive guide to natural medicine. Their relationship deepened with each passing day. Stolen kisses in the barn while they worked, holding hands while they walked, long conversations by lamplight about everything and nothing. Jack was affectionate and attentive, never pushing for more than she was comfortable giving, content to let their intimacy grow naturally. But they were careful to hide their relationship from outsiders. When Jack went into town for supplies, Morning Rain stayed at the ranch. The few times someone stopped by, a neighboring rancher or a traveling salesman, she would slip away to the back rooms until they left. It chafed at both of them, this hiding, but they knew it was necessary. Then came the day that changed everything. Jack had gone into Redemption Springs to sell some horses and pick up supplies. Morning Rain was in the garden, harvesting vegetables for dinner, when she heard a horse approaching at a gallop. She looked up to see Jack riding hard, his face grim. He dismounted before the horse had fully stopped. "Get your things, your medicine bag especially, there has been an accident." "What happened?" "Mining accident up in the hills. Cave in. At least 6 men trapped, several injured. They got them out, but the injuries are bad." Doc Bailey is refusing to go because 3 of the injured are Chinese workers. His hands clenched on the reins. "People are dying, Morning Rain, and that bastard will not help because of the color of their skin." She was already moving toward the house. "Get my supplies from the shed." "The larger basket with the red cloth, and the leather bag with the surgical tools you bought last week." They worked with swift efficiency, gathering everything they might need: bandages, medicines, sutures, clean cloths. Within 10 minutes they were both mounted and riding hard toward town. The mining camp was a chaotic scene when they arrived. Men covered in dust and blood sat or lay on the ground while their companions tried to help with inadequate knowledge and supplies. Morning Rain saw immediately that the situation was dire. One man had a leg crushed beneath falling rock. Another had a deep gash across his scalp, blood matting his hair. A young Chinese worker, barely more than a boy, lay unconscious with obvious head trauma. "Who are you?" A big man with a foreman's look stepped in front of them. "We sent for Doc Bailey." "Doc Bailey is not coming," Jack said flatly, "but this woman has medical knowledge and I have veterinary training. We can help if you will let us." The foreman looked at Morning Rain, his eyes narrowing. "She is Indian. She is a healer. And right now she is your only option unless you want to watch your men die." Jack's voice was hard as iron. "Now get out of our way." Something in his tone made the foreman step aside. Morning Rain slid from her horse and immediately went to the most critical case, the young Chinese worker. His pupils were uneven, a bad sign. She had seen this before, damage inside the skull from a hard blow. "Jack, I need you here." She knelt beside the boy, her hands already moving over his head, feeling for fractures. "His skull is intact, but there is swelling. We need to keep him still and cool. Get me cold water and clean cloths." Jack moved to obey while Morning Rain turned to the next patient, the man with the crushed leg. It was bad bone visible through torn flesh, but she thought she could save the leg if she worked fast. "You," she pointed to a miner standing nearby, "I need you to hold him down. This will hurt." For the next 3 hours she worked without stopping. Jack assisted her, following her instructions without question. She cleaned and stitched the scalp wound, packed it with yarrow to stop the bleeding. She set the crushed leg, using splints Jack fashioned from boards and torn shirts, and made a poultice of comfrey and other herbs to reduce swelling. She treated burns, cuts, bruises, one man's dislocated shoulder. The Chinese boy worried her most. She kept him cool, checked his eyes every few minutes, and finally mixed a tincture from willow bark and other herbs that might reduce the swelling in his brain. It was a gamble, but doing nothing would certainly kill him. As the sun began to set, she finally sat back on her heels, exhausted. Every injured man had been treated. Some would recover quickly, others would take weeks or months, but all of them would live. She had done what Doc Bailey refused to do. The foreman approached her slowly, his hat in his hands. "Miss, I do not know what to say. You saved these men's lives." "Doc Bailey, he said they were not worth his time, but you," he trailed off, emotion thick in his voice. "They are human beings," Morning Rain said simply. "That makes them worth my time. We cannot pay you much. Mining does not pay well." "I do not want payment. Just help these men recover." Jack appeared at her side, his shirt covered in blood and dirt. "We should go. It is getting dark and Morning Rain needs rest." As they prepared to leave, the Chinese boy's father approached. He was an older man, his face weathered and worn, and he bowed deeply to Morning Rain. "You saved my son." "I have no words to thank you enough," she bowed back. "Take care of him. Keep him quiet and still for several days. If he worsens, send someone to the Dalton Ranch and I will come." The ride back was quiet. Morning Rain was too exhausted for conversation, her body aching from the hours of intense work. But when they reached the ranch and Jack helped her dismount, she saw the way he looked at her, with awe and pride and something deeper. "You were magnificent," he said softly. "I have never seen anything like what you did today. You commanded that whole scene, made quick decisions, saved lives. You are a true healer, Morning Rain." "I just did what needed to be done." "No, you did what Doc Bailey should have done but could not because he is too full of hate." Jack cupped her face in his hands. "You are better than him, better than all of them. And I am so damn proud to know you." Then he was kissing her, and she was kissing him back, pouring all the emotion of the long day into that contact. They stumbled into the house still locked together, hands tangling in hair and clothing. The kiss deepened, grew more urgent. "Morning Rain," Jack gasped between kisses. "I want you, all of you, but only if you want the same." She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. "I want you too. I have wanted you for weeks." He lifted her carefully, mindful of her old wound, and carried her to the bedroom. They undressed each other with trembling hands, exploring and discovering. He was gentle and patient, taking his time despite his obvious desire. When they finally came together, it was with tenderness and passion combined, two people choosing each other despite all the obstacles in their way. Afterwards, they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, her head on his chest, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her shoulder. "I love you," Jack said into the darkness. "I know it is fast, I know we have only known each other a few weeks, but I love you." Morning Rain felt tears prick her eyes. "I love you too, I tried not to, I told myself it was foolish, but my heart would not listen." "Then marry me. Make this official. I want you as my wife, want to build a life with you." She wanted to say yes immediately, but reality intruded. "Jack, no one will marry us. It is illegal in some territories for whites and Indians to wed. And even where it is not illegal, finding someone willing to perform the ceremony. Then we will do it our way. We will make our own vows to each other before God and nature. That will be enough for me if it is enough for you." She lifted her head to look at him. "You would do that? Give up a legal marriage, risk your reputation further, all for me?" "I would give up everything for you. Everything I own, everyone I know, it all means nothing compared to you." His voice was fierce with conviction. "You are my future, Morning Rain. You are all I want." The tears spilled over then, running down her cheeks. "Yes, yes, I will marry you in whatever way we can. I will be yours and you will be mine." They sealed the promise with another kiss, and then with their bodies once more, taking their time now, savoring each touch and sensation. This was their wedding night, even without official sanction, and they treated it with the reverence it deserved. 3 days later, they rode up into the mountains to a place Morning Rain held sacred, a clearing beside a waterfall where her grandmother was buried. With only the trees and sky as witnesses, they stood facing each other and spoke their vows. Jack went first, his hands holding hers tightly. "I, Jackson Dalton, take you, Morning Rain, as my wife. I promise to love you, honor you, protect you, and cherish you for all the days of my life. I promise to be your partner, your friend, your shelter in hard times. I promise to listen when you speak, to value your knowledge and wisdom, to stand beside you against any who would do you harm. You are my heart, and I give it to you freely." Morning Rain's voice shook with emotion as she replied. "I, Morning Rain, take you, Jackson Dalton, as my husband. I promise to love you, honor you, stand with you, and care for you through all seasons of life. I promise to be your companion, your helper, your comfort. I promise to share my knowledge, my strength, and my heart with you. You have shown me kindness when the world showed cruelty. You have given me home when I had none. You are my future, and I embrace it with joy." Jack produced 2 simple gold bands he had purchased in town. "I bought these with some money I had saved. They are not fancy, but they are real gold." She slipped one onto his finger and he did the same for her. The metal gleamed against her bronze skin, a visible symbol of their commitment. Then Jack pulled out a knife and carefully cut his palm, letting blood well up. Morning Rain understood immediately. This was a blood oath, binding in the traditions of her people. She took the knife and did the same, then pressed her bleeding palm to his. "Our blood mingles as our lives will mingle," she said in Apache, then translated for him. "We are one now in body and spirit." They stood there in the sacred clearing, hands joined and bleeding, and Morning Rain felt a peace settle over her that she had not known since childhood. This was right. This was meant to be. That night they camped in the clearing, making love under the stars, and Morning Rain felt truly married, more married than any legal ceremony could have made her. She belonged to Jack and he belonged to her, and nothing else mattered. When they returned to the ranch, they found the Chinese man from the mining camp waiting. He had his son with him, the boy who had suffered the head injury, and Morning Rain was relieved to see him awake and alert. "My son, he is better," the man said, bowing. "You save his life. Now I must repay debt. My name is Chen Y. I work laundry with my wife in town. We hear you need help sometimes, need to stay hidden. We help you. You need to go in town, you come to laundry. We hide you, keep you safe." Morning Rain was touched by the offer. "Thank you, but you do not owe me anything." "Yes, I do. You give me my son, I give you protection, friendship." He looked at Jack. "Many people in Redemption Springs, they are not all bad. They just scared. You show them healing, show them kindness, they will come around." Some already talking about the Indian woman who saved miners when white doctor would not. After Chen Y and his son left, Jack turned to Morning Rain with excitement in his eyes. "Do you see? This is the beginning. You help people, they tell others, slowly minds change. Or they decide I am a threat and try to run me out, or worse. I will not let that happen." Jack pulled her close. "We are in this together now, husband and wife. Whatever comes, we face it together." Over the following months, that is exactly what they did. Word of Morning Rain's healing abilities spread quietly through the community. Chen Y kept his promise, and the laundry became a safe place where people could come for help without being seen going to the Dalton Ranch. Morning Rain would slip into town after dark, treat patients in the back room of the laundry, and slip out again. She helped Mrs. Chen with her daughter's persistent cough, mixing a syrup of honey and pine resin that cleared the child's lungs. She treated the blacksmith Samuel's wife through a difficult pregnancy, providing herbs that eased her nausea and strengthened her for the coming birth. She set broken bones, treated fevers, lanced infections, delivered babies. Jack accompanied her on many of these nighttime visits, continuing to learn from her. His veterinary knowledge combined with her herbal wisdom created a comprehensive understanding of healing that served them well. They made a good team, anticipating each other's needs, working in smooth coordination. But not everyone was pleased with these developments. Doc Bailey, learning that people were seeking help elsewhere, became openly hostile. He pressured the town council to take action against unlicensed medical practice. The sheriff, never friendly to begin with, started making comments about running vagrants out of town. The tension came to a head on a cold November evening. Jack and Morning Rain were eating dinner when they heard horses approaching fast. Jack grabbed his rifle and moved to the window, 5 riders, sheriff, and 4 others. His jaw was tight. "Stay inside." But Morning Rain stood and moved beside him. "No, we face this together, remember." The riders stopped in front of the house and the sheriff dismounted. "Dalton, come on out here." Jack opened the door but stood in the frame, blocking entry. "What can I do for you, Sheriff? We have received complaints about illegal medical practice. About an Indian woman living here and treating people without a license." The sheriff hooked his thumbs in his belt. "Now, I am sure you know that practicing medicine without proper credentials is against the law. Morning Rain has more medical knowledge in her little finger than Doc Bailey has in his whole body. She has saved lives that he refused to even try to save. That may be, but the law is the law. She needs to stop treating people, and honestly, Dalton, it would be better for everyone if she just moved on." Morning Rain stepped into view beside Jack. "I will not stop healing people who need help. That is my calling, my purpose." The sheriff's eyes widened slightly at her perfect English, her direct gaze. "Miss, you are putting yourself and Dalton here in danger. There are folks in town who are not happy about this situation. I cannot guarantee your safety if you continue." "Is that a threat?" Jack's voice was low and dangerous. "It is a warning. Doc Bailey has friends, powerful friends. They do not like being undermined." The sheriff looked genuinely uncomfortable now. "Look, between you and me, I think what you two are doing is admirable. My own daughter had a fever last month that Bailey could not break. She might have died if not for that syrup you sent through Chen Wai, but I have a job to do and I have to follow the law." "What exactly does the law say?" Jack challenged. "Show me the statute that says a person cannot help their neighbor. It says you cannot practice medicine without a license. I am not practicing medicine. I am sharing traditional knowledge passed down through generations of my people." Morning Rain lifted her chin. "That is not illegal." The sheriff sighed. "You are splitting hairs and you know it, but I will tell the town council that I spoke to you, that you agreed to be more discreet. That should buy you some time." He paused. "If things get worse, if there is real trouble, you need to be prepared to leave town fast." "You understand?" Jack nodded grimly. "Understood. Thank you for the warning." After the sheriff and his men rode away, Jack closed the door and leaned against it. "We need to be more careful. Maybe you should not go into town at all for a while, so Doc Bailey wins. People suffer because he is too bigoted to help them, and I am too scared to try. I would rather you scared and alive than brave and dead." Jack crossed to her and gripped her shoulders. "You are my wife, Morning Rain. I cannot lose you." She softened at the fear in his eyes. "You will not lose me, but we cannot stop helping people. It is wrong. Then we find another way. We bring people here maybe, or we travel to them on their properties where Bailey has no jurisdiction." He pulled her into his embrace. "We will figure this out. We always do." That night, they made a plan. They would be more careful, more strategic. People who needed help could come to the ranch, or Jack would make house calls on distant properties where the sheriff's reach was limited. Morning Rain would continue teaching Jack everything she knew, so that if she had to leave suddenly, the knowledge would not be lost. It was a good plan, but plans often fail when faced with reality. The crisis came in December, just as winter was settling in. A diphtheria outbreak swept through Redemption Springs, hitting children especially hard. Doc Bailey treated the wealthy families, those who could pay his high fees, but refused to help the poorer families, the immigrants, the outcasts. Children were dying. Chen Wai came to the ranch in the middle of the night, his face stricken. "Please, you must come. 3 Chinese families, children very sick, cannot breathe. We beg Bailey, he say no, you are only hope." Morning Rain did not hesitate. She grabbed her medicine bag and was mounted on Blossom before Jack could stop her. He swore and ran for his own horse, catching up with her on the road to town. "This is dangerous," he said. "The sheriff warned us. Children are dying. I will not let that happen if I can prevent it." They reached the Chinese quarter of town, a collection of small houses behind the laundry. Inside, the scene was heartbreaking. 6 children ranging in age from 3 to 10 lay struggling to breathe, their throats swollen, their skin pale. Their parents huddled nearby, exhausted and terrified. Morning Rain had seen diphtheria before, during a particularly harsh winter when she was young. It was deadly, but there were treatments if applied quickly. She immediately set to work, directing Jack to boil water while she prepared a steam treatment using eucalyptus and pine. "Hold them over the steam, let them breathe it in. It will help open their airways." She moved from child to child, examining throats, listening to labored breathing. "This one is the worst. We may need to perform a tracheotomy if the swelling does not decrease." Jack paled. "You mean cut into her throat?" "It is that or let her suffocate. I have done it twice before. Both patients lived." For hours they worked, steaming, applying poultices to throats, forcing sips of an herbal mixture that would help fight the infection. Morning Rain showed the parents how to continue the treatments, how to watch for signs of worsening, when to call for help. Slowly, painfully, the children began to improve. Breathing became easier, color returned to cheeks, fever broke. By dawn, all 6 were sleeping naturally and Morning Rain was confident they would recover. The parents wept with gratitude, trying to press money and valuables into her hands. She refused it all. "Just take care of your babies. That is all the payment I need." As they prepared to leave, Jack noticed a crowd had gathered outside. Word had spread that the Indian healer was in town, saving children that Doc Bailey had condemned. Some faces in the crowd were hostile, but many more were curious or grateful. "There she is." A woman pushed through the crowd, a woman Morning Rain recognized from previous visits to town. "That is the healer who saved my daughter last month. She is a miracle worker. She is a fraud." Another voice, male and angry. "Doc Bailey says she is dangerous, practicing dark magic." "Doc Bailey left my son to die." This from a man holding a young boy. "This woman saved him when that bastard would not lift a finger." The crowd's mood was volatile, split between support and suspicion. The sheriff appeared, looking harried and worried. "All right, everyone disperse, go home." "Why?" the grateful mother demanded. "So you can arrest her for saving lives. For doing what our so-called doctor refuses to do." "I am not arresting anyone. I am trying to prevent a riot." The sheriff looked at Jack. "You two need to leave now, before this gets out of hand." Jack took Morning Rain's arm and they moved toward their horses. But before they could mount, Doc Bailey himself appeared, flanked by several well-dressed men Morning Rain recognized as town council members. "That woman is practicing medicine illegally." Bailey's face was red with fury. "She is undermining legitimate medical practice and endangering lives with her savage remedies. Those children in there would be dead if not for her," Chen Wai said, stepping forward. "You refused to help them." "She did not." "Who is the real savage?" Bailey sputtered with rage. "How dare you?" "I am a trained physician, educated at a real medical school. She is nothing but a primitive who plays with weeds and roots." Morning Rain had stayed quiet through all of this, but now she stepped forward. "Tell me, Dr. Bailey, what is the active compound in willow bark that reduces fever?" He blinked, caught off guard. "What? Willow bark? You prescribe aspirin for fever, do you not?" "Aspirin is derived from salicylic acid, which comes from willow bark. My people have been using it for hundreds of years. So tell me, who is the primitive?" A murmur ran through the crowd. Bailey's face turned even redder. "That is completely different, is it? What about digitalis from foxglove for heart conditions, quinine from cinchona bark for malaria, morphine from poppy? All of these came from plants that indigenous peoples used long before white doctors put them in bottles and claimed credit." Morning Rain's voice was calm, but her eyes blazed. "I am not practicing magic, Dr. Bailey. I am practicing medicine the way it has been practiced for thousands of years, with knowledge and compassion. 2 things you seem to lack." The crowd was completely silent now. Even Bailey's supporters seemed uncertain. One of the council members cleared his throat. "Dr. Bailey, is it true you refuse to treat those children?" "They could not pay my standard fee," Bailey said defensively. "They offered everything they had," Chen Wai interjected. "You said their money was no good because they were Chinese." The council member looked uncomfortable. "That is a serious accusation." "It is the truth," another Chinese man said. "I was there, I heard him say it." "I have also been refused treatment," a Mexican woman spoke up. "My husband broke his arm and Bailey turned us away." "He would not set my boy's leg," added the Navajo man Jack had mentioned, the one whose son now walked with a limp. "Said he did not treat animals." More voices joined in, a chorus of the rejected and scorned. The mood of the crowd was shifting decisively against Bailey, and Morning Rain could see panic beginning to show in his eyes. "This is absurd," Bailey blustered. "I am a professional, I have standards. Standards that include letting children die because of their race." The council member's voice was cold now. "That is not medicine, Bailey, that is barbarism. You cannot believe these people over me. I am a white man, a respected physician. You are a disgrace." The council member turned to the crowd. "I move that we open a town meeting to discuss Dr. Bailey's continued employment, and to consider alternative medical care for Redemption Springs. A cheer went up from the crowd. Bailey looked like he had been slapped. "You cannot do this. I am the only doctor for 50 miles. Maybe we would be better off with no doctor than one who picks and chooses who deserves to live," someone shouted, and many voices agreed. The sheriff stepped in again. "This is not the time or place for this discussion. We will have a proper town meeting with notice given and all parties heard. For now, everyone go home." He looked at Jack and Morning Rain. "That includes you too. You have done your good deed. Now leave before this turns ugly." This time they did not argue. They mounted and rode out of town, feeling dozens of eyes on their backs. Once they were clear of the buildings, Jack let out a long breath. "That was either the best or worst thing that could have happened," he said. "What do you mean? You made Bailey look like a fool in front of half the town. You exposed his bigotry and his cruelty. Some people will love you for that, but Bailey and his friends, they will hate you more than ever. You just made powerful enemies." Morning Rain knew he was right. She had let her anger get the better of her, had confronted Bailey publicly when she should have stayed quiet. But seeing those sick children, hearing Bailey's contempt for human lives he deemed unworthy, had ignited something fierce inside her. "I do not regret it," she said firmly. "If I have to hide and be silent to be safe, then what is the point? I would rather stand up for what is right and face the consequences." Jack reached over and took her hand as they rode. "Then we face those consequences together, but we need to be prepared. Bailey is not going to take this lying down." They spent the next week fortifying the ranch, preparing for trouble. Jack taught Morning Rain to shoot, both rifle and pistol, and she proved to be a natural marksman. They stockpiled supplies, food and ammunition, and medical materials. Jack made arrangements with some of the friendlier neighboring ranchers to watch each other's properties. The town meeting was scheduled for the first Saturday in January. Jack wanted to attend, but Morning Rain insisted on going with him. "They are talking about me. I deserve to be there. It could be dangerous. Everything we do is dangerous. At least this way I can speak for myself." The meeting was held in the church, the only building large enough to hold the crowd. Nearly every resident of Redemption Springs and the surrounding area showed up. Morning Rain felt the weight of their stares as she and Jack entered, some friendly, many hostile, most curious. Doc Bailey was already there, flanked by the wealthiest men in town. He glared at Morning Rain with undisguised hatred. The town council sat at a table at the front, and the head councilman, a gray-haired man named Thompson, called the meeting to order. "We are here to discuss the medical care situation in Redemption Springs," Thompson said. "Specifically, complaints about Dr. Bailey's refusal to treat certain patients and questions about alternative care options. Dr. Bailey, you have the floor first." Bailey stood, his posture stiff. "This town has benefited from my medical expertise for 15 years. I have delivered babies, treated injuries, saved countless lives. Now you are questioning my commitment because I refuse to treat every vagrant and savage who shows up demanding free care." He gestured at Morning Rain. "This woman is not a doctor. She has no training, no credentials, no license. She practices folk medicine at best, witchcraft at worst, and yet you are considering replacing me with her." "No one said anything about replacement," Thompson said mildly, "but there are concerns about access to care for all residents." "All legal residents," Bailey emphasized. "I am under no obligation to treat foreigners and Indians who contribute nothing to this community." A rumble of disagreement ran through the crowd. Chen Wai stood up. "I am legal resident. I pay taxes. My laundry serves everyone in this town, but you refuse to treat my family." "And I am citizen," the Mexican woman added. "Born in Texas, but you turn me away because of my accent." Bailey waved them off dismissively. "I have the right to refuse service to anyone. That is my prerogative as a private practitioner." Thompson looked troubled. "Perhaps legally, but morally." "Dr. Bailey, you took an oath to do no harm. How is refusing care to sick children upholding that oath?" "I am not harming them. I am simply not treating them. There is a difference." a difference without distinction when they die from neglect. The voice came from Samuel the blacksmith, standing in the back with his pregnant wife. My family has been in this town since it was founded. We are white Christian property owners. But when my wife had trouble with her last pregnancy and could not pay your full fee upfront, you refused to come until I borrowed money at interest. We almost lost both her and the baby because you cared more about money than lives. More voices chimed in with similar stories. A rancher whose hand Bailey had treated poorly, leaving him unable to work. A widow whose son's fever Bailey had ignored until the family could scrape together his fee. The testimony went on, painting a picture of a doctor motivated by profit and prejudice rather than compassion. Finally, Thompson held up his hand for silence. Dr. Bailey, I think it is clear that there are serious concerns about your practice. The question is what we do about it. You cannot force me to treat people I do not want to treat, Bailey said. And you cannot replace me with an uneducated squaw who learned medicine from witches and shamans. The slur hit Morning Rain like a slap, but she kept her face calm. She had expected worse. Miss Morning Rain, Thompson said, would you like to respond? She stood slowly, aware of every eye on her. I am not asking to replace Dr. Bailey. I am not asking for money or recognition or official status. I am simply asking to be allowed to help people who need help. I have knowledge that can save lives. It seems criminal to waste that knowledge because of prejudice. But you are not trained, one of Bailey's supporters objected. How do we know your remedies are safe? Ask the children I treated for diphtheria. Ask the minors whose lives I saved. Ask Mrs. Chen's daughter who can breathe clearly now. Ask Samuel's wife who had an easy pregnancy thanks to herbs that eased her symptoms. Morning Rain's voice was steady. I have been healing people my whole life. My mother taught me, her mother taught her, going back generations. Our medicine works because we have refined it through centuries of practice. It is all superstition and luck, Bailey sneered. Then explain why the steam treatment I used on those children is the same treatment recommended in your own medical journals, Jack said, standing beside Morning Rain. I have been reading Bailey's medical texts. Everything Morning Rain does has a sound basis in science. She just uses natural sources instead of manufactured drugs. How dare you? Bailey turned on Jack. You are a traitor to your own race, Dalton, choosing a savage over civilized people. She is my wife, Jack said quietly, and a shocked gasp ran through the room. We married last fall, and she is worth 10 of you, Bailey. She has more compassion, more knowledge, more dedication to true healing than you could ever hope to have. The room erupted in chaos. Some people shouted congratulations, others hurled insults. Bailey looked like he might have a stroke. Thompson banged a gavel repeatedly until order was restored. Well, Thompson said dryly, that is quite a revelation. I am not sure it changes the legal situation, but it certainly makes things more interesting. He consulted with the other council members in whispered conversation, then turned back to the crowd. Here is what we are going to do. Dr. Bailey, you will remain the official town physician. However, you will be required to treat any emergency case regardless of ability to pay, with payment plans arranged as needed. Failure to comply will result in the termination of your town contract. Bailey sputtered, but Thompson continued. Miss Morning Rain, or I suppose Mrs. Dalton, now, you will be permitted to practice traditional medicine with the understanding that you are not a licensed physician and will refer any cases beyond your expertise to Dr. Bailey. You will not advertise or charge mandatory fees, but you may accept voluntary payment for your services. This is outrageous, Bailey shouted. You are giving official sanction to a primitive. I am giving the people of this town access to care they desperately need, Thompson said firmly. If you do not like it, you are free to leave and set up practice elsewhere. But I warn you, your reputation has taken a serious hit today. You may find it difficult to build a new practice. Bailey looked around the room, seeing the lack of support in most faces. He was beaten and he knew it. Fine, he said bitterly. But do not come crying to me when her remedies fail and people die. I would rather take my chances with her kindness than your cruelty, Chen Wai said, and many voices murmured agreement. The meeting broke up soon after, with people clustering around Morning Rain and Jack. Some offered congratulations on their marriage, others thanked Morning Rain for her help in the past. A few shot hostile looks but kept their distance. As they walked to their horses, Thompson caught up with them. That was well done, both of you, but be careful. Bailey has friends who will not be happy about this outcome, and there are always those who cannot accept change. We understand the risks, Jack said, but thank you for giving Morning Rain a chance. She earned it by her actions. Just keep helping people and eventually even the skeptics will come around. Thompson tipped his hat and walked away. The ride home was quiet, both of them processing what had happened. The public announcement of their marriage would have consequences, some good, some bad. But there was also a sense of relief in not having to hide anymore. I am proud of you, Jack said as they unsaddled the horses. You stood up for yourself with dignity and strength. You made Bailey look petty and small without stooping to his level. Morning Rain smiled. I learned from a good man, one who showed me that integrity matters more than acceptance. That night, they celebrated their public marriage properly, making love with joy and abandon, no longer weighed down by secrecy. This was their home, their life, their love, and they had fought for the right to live it openly. The following months brought both challenges and triumphs. Morning Rain's practice grew steadily as word spread that she was officially permitted to heal. People came to the ranch at all hours, some with emergencies, others with chronic problems Bailey had been unable or unwilling to solve. She treated arthritis with willow bark and devil's claw, eased childbirth with raspberry leaf tea and skilled hands, cured infections with honey and garlic poultices. Jack assisted her, his knowledge growing daily until he could handle many cases himself. Together they became an effective medical team, serving a community that had been underserved for too long. Doc Bailey continued practicing, but his patient load dwindled as more people chose Morning Rain's gentler, more affordable care. He became increasingly bitter, drinking more, letting his practice slide. There were rumors he might leave Redemption Springs entirely, though nothing came of it. Not everyone was happy with the new arrangement. A few families refused to acknowledge Morning Rain's marriage to Jack, treating her as his mistress rather than his wife. Some shopkeepers would not serve her directly, forcing Jack to do their purchasing. There were occasional hostile comments, threats muttered under breath but never acted upon. But the support outweighed the hatred. Chen Wai and his wife became close friends, often inviting Morning Rain and Jack to dinner. Samuel the blacksmith built them a new chicken coop as a wedding present. Mexican families from the outskirts of town would arrive with gifts of food and woven blankets. The community Morning Rain had longed for all her adult life was slowly forming around her. Spring arrived with its annual burst of wildflowers and new life. Morning Rain was in the garden planting vegetables when she felt the familiar queasiness that had been plaguing her for the past week. She sat back on her heels, hand on her stomach, and felt a flutter of excitement mixed with anxiety. She waited until she was certain before telling Jack. He came in from mending fences to find her sitting at the kitchen table, her hands folded in front of her. "What is wrong?" He asked immediately, seeing her serious expression. "Nothing is wrong. Something is very right, actually." She stood and took his hands. "Jack, I am pregnant. We are going to have a baby." His face went through a series of expressions: shock, joy, fear, wonder. Then he laughed and swept her into his arms, spinning her around before gently setting her down. "A baby! We are having a baby. Are you happy?" she asked, though his reaction made the answer obvious. "Happy. I am thrilled, terrified, but thrilled." He placed his hand carefully on her still flat stomach. "A little person, half you and half me. It is miraculous." They stood there in the kitchen, wrapped in each other's arms, contemplating the future growing inside her. Morning Rain felt a peace settle over her soul. This baby would be born into a world that might not fully accept them, but it would be born into love. That was enough. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Morning Rain continued her healing work, though Jack became increasingly protective as she grew larger. She treated her own symptoms with herbs and teas, staying healthy and strong throughout. In late autumn, as the leaves turned gold and the air grew crisp, Morning Rain went into labor. Jack had been preparing for this moment, reading every medical text he could find on childbirth, but when the time came, he found himself nearly paralyzed with fear. "Jack," Morning Rain said calmly between contractions, "I need you to focus. You have delivered dozens of calves and foals. A human baby is not so different. But this is our baby. If something goes wrong, nothing will go wrong. Women have been doing this since the beginning of time. Now help me to the bed and get the supplies ready." He did as instructed, falling back on training and instinct. Morning Rain guided him through the process, telling him what she needed even as her body did the hard work. Labor lasted through the night and into the next morning. Just as the sun rose over the mountains, their son was born. Jack cut the cord with shaking hands and wrapped the baby in a clean blanket before placing him in Morning Rain's arms. The infant had a shock of dark hair and bronze skin just a shade lighter than his mother's. His eyes, when he opened them, were green like his father's. "He is perfect," Jack whispered, tears streaming down his face. "Absolutely perfect. He needs a name," Morning Rain said, gazing down at her son with overwhelming love. "What should we call him?" They had discussed names for months without deciding. Now Jack said, "What about River?" "Your people name children after nature, and rivers connect mountains to plains, bringing life wherever they go. He is the connection between your world and mine." "River Dalton," Morning Rain tested the name. "Yes, I like that. River Dalton." The baby made a small sound, almost like agreement, and they both laughed with exhausted joy. The first year of River's life was filled with the normal challenges of new parenthood. Sleepless nights, endless diapers, constant feeding, but it was also filled with wonder. Every smile, every new sound, every tiny accomplishment felt like a miracle. Morning Rain continued her healing work, though at a reduced pace while River was an infant. She would see patients in the morning while Jack watched the baby, then take over childcare in the afternoon so Jack could work the ranch. It was exhausting but fulfilling, a life built on mutual support and shared responsibility. The people of Redemption Springs embraced River with surprising warmth. Even those who had been cold to Morning Rain softened when they saw the baby. There is something about an innocent child that breaks down barriers, and River's cheerful disposition made him a favorite among townspeople. Chen Y's wife made him beautiful little outfits, embroidered with delicate patterns. Samuel crafted a wooden cradle that could rock with the gentlest push. The Mexican families brought handmade toys and blessed the baby according to their traditions. River was growing up surrounded by diverse cultures and unconditional love. Doc Bailey remained hostile, but his influence had waned significantly. He had taken to drinking heavily, and his practice had dwindled to almost nothing. There were rumors he was deeply in debt and might lose his practice entirely. Morning Rain felt no satisfaction in his downfall, only sadness that a man with genuine medical training had thrown it away because of hatred. When River was 18 months old, Morning Rain discovered she was pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was harder, with more sickness and fatigue. But Jack was there every step, taking on extra work around the house and with her patients. Their daughter was born in the spring, during a rainstorm that washed the desert clean. She had her mother's dark eyes and her father's light brown hair, a beautiful blend of both parents. They named her Sky because she was born during a storm but arrived with calm. With 2 children, the ranch house felt smaller but infinitely warmer. River adored his baby sister, wanting to help with everything. Jack proved to be a devoted father, patient and playful, teaching River to ride before the boy was even 3. Morning Rain watched her family grow with a happiness she had never imagined possible back when she was alone in the mountains, struggling to survive. Years passed in a rhythm of seasons and celebrations. River and Sky grew into bright, curious children who moved easily between their Apache heritage and their American upbringing. Morning Rain taught them the language and customs of her people, taking them into the mountains to learn about plants and animals and the sacred places of her grandmother. Jack taught them ranching skills, reading and writing, and the value of hard work. The children attended the town school, where they faced occasional teasing about their mixed heritage but mostly found acceptance. River showed his mother's gift for healing, always bringing home injured animals to nurse back to health. Sky was more interested in horses, spending hours in the stable learning to train and care for them. Doc Bailey finally left town when River was 5, his practice foreclosed on and his reputation in ruins. The town council officially appointed Morning Rain as the primary healer for Redemption Springs, a position she held with quiet pride. She had proven that competence and compassion mattered more than the color of one's skin or the source of one's education. Jack expanded the ranch over the years, buying adjoining property and increasing the herd. But he never let the work consume him the way it did some ranchers. Family always came first, and he made sure to spend time with his wife and children every day, no matter how busy things got. When River turned 10 and Sky was 8, they traveled as a family to visit what remained of Morning Rain's tribe. The Kairikahua Apache had been moved to a reservation far from their ancestral lands, and the conditions were harsh. But seeing her people again, introducing them to her husband and children, meant everything to Morning Rain. The elders welcomed Jack with cautious respect. He had proven himself a good husband and father, had raised his children to know their Apache heritage. That earned him acceptance, even affection. The children spent a month learning from their grandmother's people, absorbing stories and skills that Morning Rain alone could not teach them. When they returned to the ranch, all 4 of them felt more complete, more connected to something larger than themselves. River began keeping a journal of healing knowledge, combining his mother's traditional medicine with things he learned from books. Sky started training horses using methods she had learned from the Apache horse handlers, gentler and more effective than the rough breaking common among white ranchers. Time continued its steady march. Jack's hair began to silver at the temples. Morning Rain found her first gray hairs. But their love remained as strong as ever, deepened by years of partnership and shared challenges. They added a room onto the house when Morning Rain became pregnant for a 3rd time at 35. This surprise baby, another son they named Stone for his solid, steady temperament, completed their family. River and Sky doted on their little brother, and Jack joked that he was outnumbered by children. The town of Redemption Springs continued to grow and change. More families arrived, drawn by tales of tolerance and opportunity. The Chinese community expanded, opening restaurants and shops. Mexican families established farms that supplied food to the growing population. A new doctor arrived, a young man fresh from medical school who was eager to learn from Morning Rain rather than compete with her. Jack served on the town council for several years, pushing for policies that protected all residents regardless of race or background. He helped establish a school that welcomed all children, a clinic where Morning Rain could practice officially, and laws against discrimination in business. Their ranch became a gathering place for the community. During holidays, people of all backgrounds would come together to celebrate, sharing food and music and stories. The children growing up in this environment, including River and Sky and Stone, knew a different world than their parents had, one where diversity was celebrated rather than condemned. When Jack turned 50 and Morning Rain was 45, they took stock of their lives on a quiet evening after the children had gone to bed. Stone, now 12, was the last one still at home. River, 23, was studying medicine formally with the new doctor while maintaining his natural healing practice. Sky, 21, was running the horse training operation that had become a significant part of the ranch's income. "Did you ever imagine we would end up here?" Morning Rain asked, leaning against Jack's shoulder as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. "That day I picked you up in the street, bleeding and desperate. No, I had no idea where that choice would lead." He wrapped his arm around her. "But I would make the same choice again without hesitation. You are the best decision I ever made. Even though I brought you nothing but trouble," she teased. "You brought me everything that matters: love, family, purpose, a reason to be better than I was." He kissed the top of her head. "I was just existing before you. You taught me how to live." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sky darken and stars emerge. A coyote called from the hills and was answered by another. From inside the house came the sound of Stone practicing his guitar, a rambling melody that spoke of youth and possibility. "He is going to be a musician," Morning Rain said. "Not a rancher or a healer, but a musician. I can feel it. As long as he is happy, that is all that matters." Jack stood and offered his hand. "Come to bed, my love. We have another full day tomorrow." She took his hand and let him pull her up. His grip was as strong as ever, his eyes still as green, though life had carved lines around them. He was still the most beautiful man she had ever seen, made more so by the kindness and integrity that shone from within. That night, they made love with the practiced ease of long partnership, knowing exactly how to please each other, finding joy in familiar rhythms. Afterwards, wrapped in each other's arms, Morning Rain felt profoundly grateful for the life they had built together. More years flowed by like water over stone, wearing away rough edges and revealing the essential shapes beneath. Jack's hair went fully gray. Morning Rain's hands developed the slight tremble that comes with age. But they remained healthy and active, still working the ranch though the children had taken over most of the heavy labor. River married a schoolteacher from town, a kind woman who shared his passion for healing. They gave Jack and Morning Rain 3 grandchildren in quick succession, all of whom spent long hours at the ranch learning from their grandparents. Sky married later, to a Mexican rancher's son, and they combined their properties into a successful horse breeding operation. Stone indeed became a musician, traveling throughout the territory playing in saloons and theaters, but he always came home for holidays. The ranch house expanded again to accommodate family gatherings. Holidays became major productions with children and grandchildren filling every room, noise and laughter and love overflowing. Jack and Morning Rain watched their family grow with quiet satisfaction. They had built something lasting, something that would endure beyond their individual lives. Their children and grandchildren would carry forward the values they had taught: compassion, integrity, respect for all people regardless of background. One evening, when Jack was 67 and Morning Rain 62, they rode out together as they had done so many times before. Just the two of them, horses moving at an easy pace through the familiar landscape. They ended up at the clearing where they had married all those years ago, beside the waterfall where Morning Rain's grandmother was buried. "I want to be buried here," Morning Rain said suddenly, "when my time comes. Next to my grandmother in this sacred place." Jack nodded slowly. "And I will lie beside you if that is acceptable to your ancestors. You have earned the right. You have honored my people, raised your children to respect their heritage, lived with integrity." She smiled at him. "My grandmother's spirit has welcomed you long ago." They dismounted and sat beside the waterfall, holding hands and listening to the eternal sound of falling water. The place looked much the same as it had nearly 40 years ago when they had spoken their vows. A few more trees, some stones shifted by weather and time, but essentially unchanged. "I have had a good life," Jack said quietly. "Better than I deserved. You made me better than I was. We made each other better. That is what love does." Morning Rain leaned her head on his shoulder. "I was alone and bitter when you found me, convinced the world held nothing but cruelty. You showed me different. You showed me that kindness exists, that people can change, that love transcends the barriers society tries to build. I love you, Jack said simply. I have loved you since that first day, and I will love you beyond death. And I love you, always and forever. They sat there until the sun set and stars emerged overhead, just two old lovers holding hands in a sacred place, grateful for every moment they had been given. Time, that relentless force, eventually claimed them both. Jack died first at 73, peacefully in his sleep with morning rain beside him. She mourned him deeply but without regret, knowing they had lived fully and loved completely. True to their wishes, he was buried in the clearing by the waterfall, Morning Rain's grandmother on one side, space for Morning Rain on the other. She lived another 6 years without him, surrounded by family but missing her partner fiercely. She continued her healing work until the very end, treating patients into her late 60s. Her knowledge was preserved in River's journals, in the lessons she taught her grandchildren, in the changed attitudes of an entire community. When Morning Rain died at 68, it was at home in the ranch house Jack had built, with her children and grandchildren around her. Her last words were a smile and "I am coming, Jack, wait for me." They buried her next to her husband, and the whole town of Redemption Springs turned out for the funeral. White and Mexican and Chinese and Native people standing together, mourning a woman who had bridged divides and healed wounds both physical and social. The service included Christian prayers and Apache rituals, music in English and Spanish and the language of her people. In the years after, the Dalton Ranch remained in the family, passed down through generations. The clearing by the waterfall became a pilgrimage site, where people came to pay respects to Jack and Morning Rain, the cowboy and the healer who had loved each other against all odds and changed their corner of the world forever. Their children thrived. River became the most respected healer in the territory, eventually training doctors in natural medicine. Sky's horse breeding operations supplied mounts throughout the Southwest. Stone's music carried stories of his parents' love and courage to audiences everywhere he played. Their grandchildren and great-grandchildren grew up in a world shaped by Jack and Morning Rain's example. The story of the town doctor who wouldn't touch her native skin and the cowboy who learned medicine and healed her himself was passed down through generations. It became a legend, then a legacy, then simply the truth that lived in the hearts of all who knew it. That love transcends hate, that kindness matters more than prejudice, and that one brave choice can ripple outward to change everything. The ranch still stands today, a testament to two people who refuse to let the world's cruelty define them. The waterfall still flows, eternal and unchanging, whispering the story of love that bloomed in the Wild West when a wounded woman stumbled into town, and a young cowboy chose compassion over conformity. In that clearing, 3 graves rest side by side under the pine trees: a grandmother who taught wisdom, a cowboy who learned to heal, and a woman who taught him that the best medicine is always love.